Hello everyone and welcome to live event number 22. My name is Jeff Rolka. I'm in a somewhat new setting, so if you can hear me or if you can't hear me, please do let me know via the chat. As far as I know, the chat is open, and the idea behind this event is to take questions and offer what answers and information and knowledge I have accumulated over the years. Before I get started, I want to thank you for joining me, and if you have chosen to subscribe, thank you again. If you haven't yet, I hope that you will consider doing so now. The little icon in the bottom of the screen is where you can do that, and that's pretty much it. I'll do another station identification around halfway through and also give you a warning on the time frame. And I have a new segment that I am kind of excited about tonight, so we will get into that shortly. So, without further ado, I see that some people have popped up, and I want to say hello to you, Jonathan Brown. Hello, Aldo, and welcome as always. It's so nice to see you pop up. Thank you for the view. Yes, I am actually broadcasting from Spain this evening. JC's Radiant Ray, it is good to see you popping up. I'm glad that you can hear well where you are at. And Heidi, welcome back. It has been some time since I've seen you pop up in the chat, and I'm very glad to see you back here. So I've got a couple leftover questions from the week, but the chat is clearly open, so please do feel free to pop in and get your questions in there. Someone wrote, Jeff, I always wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on bel canto versus speech level singing and techniques in general? And I thought this was a really cool question. Basically, the thing about the various techniques is that most of them to me seemed to be a repackaging of bel canto. But they're looking at different aspects of the technique. So they may look at vowel focus almost in their entirety. Other techniques may take a really, really intense scientific look at the musculature and all that sort of thing in their teaching of the voice. And then other techniques will take different approaches entirely. The thing is that mostly it's repackaging of the bel canto idea, the way that we look at vowel focuses, the way that we look at airflow, but they all take different approaches towards teaching those concepts. And if you think about it for a moment, we all communicate and learn in different ways. And so each one of these techniques has some value. It may not necessarily have value for you, but it may be very, very valuable to someone else who doesn't learn in quite the same way that you do. So, I've studied with full-on sort of traditional bel canto people, and I've studied with heavy-hitting SLS teachers and people who have hybridized their systems, and others still that approach singing, teaching in ways that are completely different from either of those two, that don't seem to draw on them in any way. And I think for me personally, they all have things to offer. They all have different levels of effectiveness. I tend to really focus on the airflow aspects of bel canto, and I use a lot of the scientific and musculature information from Richard Miller and the way that he taught his singing methodology, which is basically a repackaging of bel canto. It was his spin on it, and it incorporates a lot of that structure. So I think these things are all really, really good and all very, very valuable. Some people are going to learn better in some situations than others, and you've got to be sensitive to that. I see some things popping up on the screen, so I'm going to take a look here. Familiar names, Jimi Hendrix, hello. I'm glad to see you back this week as well. You like flamenco music? Yeah, that's right. I did that Spanish Phrygian scale not too long ago. It is very passionate music. Good afternoon to you, Jaheim. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Capone asks, so how to make more emotion in singing without crying? I had a really, I had this question come up recently, and the short answer is it takes practice. The extrapolation of that is that we have to practice walking the line where we're gonna break down and not, get verklempt, not be able to sing as effectively. So, speaking for myself, there are songs, there are words that I might sing that I may have written that other people have written. They're just songs. And in the process of singing those songs and in trying to bring the emotion to them, I can sometimes go a little too far and get a little upset by singing the song. It happens quite frequently, in fact. It really shouldn't be a surprise, right? Like, I'm a musician and a music teacher because music touches me so intimately and so deeply. And I have to assume that most of you are here chatting with me and doing all this stuff with your voices for similar reasons. Like, music is this incredibly powerful emotional force. And for those of us given to spending time and energy and sometimes money to work on our craft to make it better and better and better, it's no surprise that we're going to feel these things very deeply. So for me, I have to practice kind of riding that line. And there's a point. I can sort of discern this point where if I go a little bit too far, I'm going to go over the edge and I'm going to get upset and I'm not going to be able to continue the song. And sometimes it happens anyway. Like, sometimes I'll feel that edge and I'll try to pull myself back and it doesn't work. And it happens. For me, I temper that focus on the emotional aspects of it with a focus on my breathing. And you'll notice, I come back to this very frequently. And in my teaching, it is a huge part of how I teach. My sense of center and my sense of focus is, if you played Operation as a child, where you pick the little things out and it had the buzzer if you hit the sides, it was the breadbasket. The breadbasket that meeting the top of the rectus abdominis muscles where the solar plexus are, that for me is a central focal point for just keeping calm, for centering myself, for staying in the performance and staying emotive at the same time. Now, there are, I think, practical aspects of emoting in music as well. How you approach your rhythms will communicate different things to your audience. If you are really, really legato and you're kind of taking the edges off of the rhythm, so perhaps it's precise, but it's not quite so precise or marcato, then that conveys a certain laxness to the delivery. It conveys that to your audience. If you're incredibly rhythmically precise and perhaps a bit edgier with the enunciation of your words, that's going to convey something else. Your use of volume and how you use the different ranges and registers of your voice will also communicate emotional aspects to your audience. All of those things go into it. And I think that when we're working on a song, whether it's our own song that we have written or we're singing a cover song, exploring those avenues in somewhat an academic fashion to begin, and then settling in on a performance practice over time can really help us find out how we are going to communicate with our audience and what works best for us in the context of a song, because it may not be the same that the original artist did with it. Aldo says, they are so happy. A Shure SM7B just arrived and it is waiting for my recording. Any advice when we record? Use a pop filter for one. Get great rest before you have to go, unless you're getting one of those budget kind of overnight sessions, which As a vocalist, I don't recommend, but it does save money. When I was working in San Francisco, we would do, I think you'd call it like third shift, from 10 p.m. in the evening until 6 or 8 a.m. in the morning, and you could get a reduced rate on the studio time. I don't think that's as popular as it used to be, because there are so many different ways for us to record, and studios, there are so many more studios that are already offering really incredibly competitive rates. But yeah, rest up, be very, very well practiced before your session. Use a pop filter, and I don't mean like, I have to admit, I am not entirely familiar with the SM7B. I don't know exactly what that is. I mean, certainly like a 57B, like a 57 beta, I'm very, very familiar with, or an 87B beta, I'm also very familiar with. But a 7, I am new to. So, use a pop filter. Don't not the thing like the foam thing that fits over the top of it. Use one of the screens that goes in front of your face, so that your plosives don't pop the diaphragm on the microphone. Stay well hydrated, get really, really good rest, be well practiced, and be flexible. Consider cutting your track. Just to see how it goes, basically. Be flexible is a big, big thing. Jahan, it moved on me there. How can I make my head voice sound stronger? It doesn't sound breathy, but I feel like it isn't strong enough. Depends on where you are in the process. If it's not breathy, that is comforting to know, because then hopefully you are making a smooth transition to your cricothyroid dominant singing voice. If that is in fact the case, then making it sound stronger comes with increasing the airflow as you ascend and making sure that the vowels align properly from chest voice to head voice. Thyroarytenoid dominant singing, chest voice, head voice, cricothyroid dominant singing. And that does mean being lighter on the vocal fold and less in volume in the thyroarytenoid dominant range, so that when you make your transition through the secondo passaggio, you're carrying with it the resonance, and the soft tissues in the oral cavity can remain loose, so that they all keep on resonating and bringing all that richness into the upper range of your voice. When we're too heavy on the bottom, it makes that transition very difficult, if not impossible. But if you're not breathy, then you should be, in theory, making a good transition. But you still may be holding on to some tension in the oral cavity that's dampening down the resonances. So maybe re-up your airflow game. Do the super lip trill. Woo. With your scales, to make sure you've really, really got some good abdominal engagement happening to stimulate that airflow, and see if that has an impact on the delivery. Those things those things all in conjunction. It's gonna be some of that, or a little bit of all of that is going to make the head voice resonate a bit more fully and sound more consistent with your thyroarytenoid dominant singing chest voice. Aldo, you are so right about breathing. Thank you. For example, Mr. Mercury, you can't listen to his breaths while Taylor Swift breathes so badly and can be so audible. That is something, that's a very, very good observation, I have to say. When you can hear those breaths, and there are sometimes, like if I do go through my breathing expansion, I'm reasonably certain you can hear that. Of course, I'm just being as open as I can, and there's a large volume of air. The top-up breaths probably are inaudible. So if I take my breath, the little top-up breaths where I'm not filling the entirety of my lungs, because there's just sometimes there's a reasonable amount of volume of air that's coming in. But I've been practicing this for a really, really long time, and I'm really, really good at allowing the musculature and the soft tissues in the oral cavity to stay released when I take that breath in. When you hear that kind of a sound when someone takes a breath, they're actually engaging the thyroarytenoid muscle. They're engaging their vocal fold. And aside from dragging air across your vocal fold as you inhale, that tension typically sets us up rather poorly for what we are about to sing. So sometimes you'll get lucky, and whatever it was you phonated on the way in will be what you're about to phonate on the way out, and it can kind of work out. But 99% of the time, that tension is unnecessary and undesirable for what we're about to sing. And it makes it much more difficult for us to get a clean tonal onset when we start the next phrase that we're getting onto. Maddie, I have absolutely loved learning the arpeggio technique in your college voice lessons. I feel such a difference in my breathing and singing in general. Absolutely. I say it in the videos, and I say it all the time. Studying arpeggio, learning that method, single most important adjustment to my technique I have probably ever made to my technique. I mean, there are other things like vowel formations and stuff like that that got adjusted along the way, but nothing had as significant and all-encompassing impact on my singing voice in general. So that's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that you're working on that and it's having a good effect on your voice. Fantastic. David R., how do you make vocal parts for songs? I find it hard to make vocal parts, but easy to make guitar parts for songs. Let's see if there's anything else in there. Intriguing question. My first thought is, are you writing chordal parts for the guitars or linear, like melodic parts for the guitar? If you're doing melodic parts, then my first thing would be to say, why not approach writing your vocal part the way you approach your guitar lines, your guitar melodies? Whether that's humming it out or picking it out on the guitar, sort of, search and destroy, however you might go about that. If they're chordal parts, well, it's a very different process because the chords are forming the structure of the song, and while they kind of make a melody of sorts when you play, chord changes from one to the next, a vocal melody functions quite differently than those chordal parts would. So the way that I do vocal parts for songs is usually to kind of sit and imagine it. I might hum along a little bit. If it's an original, well, it's going to be an original song, then it's almost like daydreaming. And then I'll transcribe that melody. So I'll figure it out on the piano or guitar so I know exactly what it was I was humming along in my mind and singing to, and then I'll experiment with different chord progressions and things like that. That is what that's like the first step in my songwriting process, is the creation of what I call a nugget. It's obviously not a technical term, right? No one in music calls anything a nugget, but it's what I call it. And what that is a little bit of vocal melody, a little bit of lyric, and a little bit of chord change. And that goes into a big playlist in iTunes. And I listen to that playlist, and I listen to what inspires me. And when I find something that really catches my ear, that's when I start to pull it apart and stretch it out. And then I might start to look at where I want the melody to go, what I want it to do. Do I want any kind of special sauce chords? Like, am I going to keep it entirely diatonic, or am I going to use any applied dominance or things like that? Am I going to borrow any chords from the minor key, or if I'm in minor, what major tonalities am I going to borrow from? and adapt my melody accordingly. I have, from time to time, written melodies based upon intervals that I wanted to work on more. So like I've got this one tune. It goes, long road, white lines. That open fifth. I wanted to write a song that had a perfect fifth to start it. And that ended up with the song. So I've approached melody writing from a variety of different ways. And I've taken snippets of other things. I know I see that I'm going to talk about Bach chorales here in a second. I've taken little snippets of melody thematic material from Bach chorales and incorporated those into melodies as well. Fact is, the soprano lines of those Bach chorales were all traditional melodies anyway. So if Bach can borrow and feel good about it, I have no problem with that. I read, Maddie Hendrix says, I read the Shirley Emmons article you talk about because I was so fascinated by the technique. It is great. It is really, really great. And it's very easy to digest. It's a good jumping off point for understanding Appoggio, which is why I recommend it so much. She makes it very, very easy for us to understand. Jaheim is talking to David, and that actually reminds me of the new segment of our thing here. I thought what I would do, I want to throw this out to all of you in the hopes that maybe it would stimulate some cross conversations and things like that in the chat. So I had this question come in, and it said, I'm interested in your thoughts and those of your students and followers, so that's all of us, on how they contend with the challenges that come with any degree of fame in any arena of life. No matter how small the circle, there seem to be consequences, facts of life we must all face when we become famous to any group of people. From those issues within one's control to those which are not, from emotional to personal safety issues, how do you and your students contend with fame? So there you go. Talk amongst yourselves. Come on back to me with it. I have to tell you, like, from my perspective, I have not worked with a lot of famous people. And I've kind of worked with like the sort of I've worked with like the not quite famous people. So like I had a lesson where I was working with someone who happened to be one of Adele's backing vocalists when she was not her most recent tours, but the tour like 5 or 6 years ago. I worked with one of her backing vocalists briefly, and you know, there was nothing at all strange about her. She didn't seem to have any kind of any kind of like, issues or anything at all. It all seemed quite natural for her. I don't know. Speaking for myself, in my like somewhat small circle of notoriety, the one thing that I have noticed to a certain degree is that for people that have worked with the YouTube channel for a long period of time, occasionally someone will meet with me for a lesson, and there can be a certain amount of anxiety around that meeting. I get nervous for all my lessons. I always want to bring my like AA game to every lesson, to everything that I do. But there can be a sort of jitteriness that I haven't noticed in the past. I know that the voice is a sensitive thing, and when we study voice, it makes us vulnerable to the person who is going to offer their thoughts and hopefully their help. Speaking from firsthand experience, I've had some great lessons with great people that were incredibly encouraging and very, very helpful in their criticisms, and I've had some of quite the opposite experience. So I expect a certain amount of that, but there's a certain new jitteriness that I've seen recently, which sometimes makes it challenging to slow the lesson down, to slow things down, and to try to make the person as comfortable as I possibly can when we're working through things. But I would be interested in what you all have to say about that too, because I don't, like I said, I haven't really worked with that many people that are really, really famous. Although there's one Spanish language vocalist who recently subscribed to the channel, who's got thousands and thousands of subscribers and millions of views. So that was pretty exciting too. Michael, welcome. I'm glad you did not miss it. Capone, I just found that it is easier to sing high when I focus more airflow to the nose or up sinus cavities or what. You're probably feeling a little bit of inflation of the nasal pharynx, and you're probably also taking a bit of weight off the thyroarytenoid muscles off your chest voice. That's allowing for an easier transition through the secundopassaggio to the cricothyroid muscle, and that's what's making it a little bit easier. The NG sound, as you say there, is very, very helpful in that. It's really, really helpful at getting airflow to the nasal pharynx and getting a little bit more of that forward focus of the airflow. Melissa Cross describes it as singing over the pencil. And I think that's an interesting way of describing it. And that sounds like what you're talking about here, that sort of lift that we get. That's really cool. Congratulations. Aldo writes, Maestro, what vowels do you use when I practice chorales? I can't read them, so I have to listen again and again. Bach was amazing. Keep in mind, like, the Western tonal system of music that we use, like, every song I have ever written, every song, that we listen to that is of a Western tonal music tradition, that system was codified by Bach. Like, we still use those rules. We break them a lot, but we still use them when we write tonal music. Incredible. I use solfege syllables in the movable do format. So when I'm working on Bach chorales, then I'm doing that primarily for ear training purposes, and I use solfege syllables. Jaheim writes, do I have any tips for going into musical theater? Well, you got to be a triple threat when you're in musical theater. That's my first thought with that. And what I mean by that is you got to sing, you have to dance, and you have to act. Specific to the voice, I feel like for to be an effective theater vocalist, you have to know your range really, really intimately, because they're gonna want you to belt quite a lot. Make sure that you restrict yourself to within a major second of your secondo passaggio. Otherwise, you're gonna endure a lot of vocal fatigue and possibly need lots of time off or have some problems later on down the line. Anything that exceeds your range by more than a major second above the secondo passaggio, I recommend you make your transition through the secondo passaggio into your cricothyroid voice. And in the short term and long term, I would be practicing to make that transition as seamless as you can possibly make it, and really, really matching timbre above and below the break so that you can employ that with increasing frequency. There's a theater vocalist whose name escapes me, who actually spoke to this before, and what she had to say is that she just never belts. Everyone was always asking her to belt, and she would always say that she did, but she never did. She always made a smooth transition through the secondo passaggio because it was in the best interests of her vocal health and her vocal longevity. So that would be my first concerns for you. It's 1:30, so I'm going to do my station identification. My name is Jeff Rolka. For you, those of you that are new or are just joining us, although it looks like a lot of familiar names tonight, which is always wonderful. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If not, please consider doing so now. The question on the floor is fame. How do you deal with it? How do your clients deal with it? What do you think about it? What are the pitfalls? What are your fears? Yeah. What do you think? Actually, now that I mention that, I have met Sting before, and he was lovely. Like, he was super kind to me. And in that instance, I was freaking out because at the time I really idolized him. And perhaps one of the nicest people I have ever known or met, who I think of as famous, is Tony Levin, who was like an iconic bass player, played bass for years for Peter Gabriel. Just such an amazingly nice man. Absolutely amazing. Michael says, Jeff, sometimes just after doing my warm-ups, it is harder to sing some parts than before those warm-ups. It happens because my voice is tired or I do something wrong. I like what Jaheim has to say there. Taking breaks between the warm-ups is an excellent, excellent idea. It can let your voice warm up nice and gradually over a longer period of time. And the water thing, absolutely, absolutely crucial. My thought, however, is what notes you're losing. If it's on the bottom of your range, that's entirely normal. As the tissues get engorged with blood during your warm-up, the lower notes, you can lose a major second to a minor third of your bottom end as your warm-up continues and as those tissues start to get warmed up, to get blood flowing into them. So if it's that, then if you've got to sing something with those notes, then really, really watch your warm-up and do the bare minimum before you hit the stage with that one. If it's not those lower notes, then I'd like to know what it is. Maybe be more specific in the range that you're discussing. Aldo, honey, water, that's 2. I can't sing after warm-up, I kill. I don't know, I'm so used to them, used to warm-up and exercises. I'm with you. I love singing scales. I love singing exercises. I have to remember to practice. I don't have to remember to practice music, but I can easily just practice scales and focus on the overall delivery of my voice. Nowadays, though, it doesn't take me long at all to warm up. It's just literally it can be 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm basically ready to go. I may not be mentally warmed up with that short of a time, but vocally I'm ready to go. Greg's Life 7. Greg, hello. A lot has been going well with my voice. High notes going well. I no longer lose high-low notes by the end of a session, but I focus a bit more on my tone, and I'm having trouble. My voice sounds a bit dull when I listen to recordings, even though I feel lots of buzz in my head when I sing it. It also seems like a lot of my vowels have an sound in them. Any advice? I'm wondering where is this throughout your range? If you could be a little bit more specific with me. If this is above the secondo passaggio, then the balance isn't quite right, and you've got a little bit too much of that the vowel modification present in your delivery of the vowels. That's normal. If it's in your thyroarytenoid dominant voice, in your lower, your chest voice, then you're not getting as pure a form of vowel as you can probably get. You're not quite producing a balanced tone there, or you are anticipating your register shift. If it's like a line that ascends and you're anticipating the register shift too soon, the buzz in your head certainly can still be there and have those things happen, and that's what it sounds like. But let me know in the comments in the chat if that sounds like I'm on the right track. My suspicion is you're anticipating the transition change, and you've got the vowel modification coming in too soon. Above the break, you may have too much of it in the vowel sounds, but be cautious with that. It hasn't been that long that you've been making a really, really successful transition through the secondo passaggio, and it can take a little bit of time and practice for that to balance out. So yeah, let me know what's going on a little bit more specifically, but that sounds like what's going on for you. Michael has a similar question as David, how to find chords for melody. I can do it, but I do it blindly. What is the best way to find them, especially when I do not know the key of the song? Interesting question. Wow. Um, well, I mean, if you don't know your key, um, do you know your melody? If you know the notes of the melody, that would be the best place to start, because even if you don't read music, then you could look at a chord chart and look at collections of notes. Like, look at, if you sang a melody and it had like, oh, I've got a D, a B flat, a G, and an F, then you look through your chord charts and your scale chart. Maybe a scale chart would be a better place to start, and say like, okay, well, B flat major has those notes in it. F major has those notes in it. I think I said B flat, D. Did I say E? If I said E, then it's going to have to, and then it's most likely going to be F major. But it could also be G. I think I said G as well. So that would be a starting point, and then from those key areas, look at what your chord selections are, and kind of go from there. But if you can't figure out the notes of the melody, you're kind of going to be, it's going to be seek and destroy is what that is going to amount to. I suppose you could always sing into a tuner to figure out the notes, like a chromatic tuner. You could sing the notes, and then it would tell you the letter names, and then you could write them down, and look at your scales, and then look at your chords. That would be one way to do it too. But you might also try from the other route. Try your chords first, and then make up a melody to fit those chord changes. Greg, yeah, I think you have my information for that. Jaheim, that's true too. Yeah, changing your warm-ups, switching it up a little bit can be a good idea. I missed all this. Wait a minute, where am I here? Okay. Aldo says, Jaheim, breathe properly, bro, and relax. Yeah. Jaheim's laughing. Okay, good, you guys saw that. Michael, I use electric piano, but I want to buy acoustic one. How much money I have got to spend for a used piano to not regret my purchase? It really depends on what you're willing to deal with. I mean, you can get a reasonably priced upright for not a lot of money. It won't be pretty, but it really needs to hold a tuning. I would recommend you find a reputable used piano dealer and go and see what they've got. They almost always have some budget pianos. If you don't know of one, this is this is a super long shot, but I've always liked DC Piano in Berkeley. I think they're in Berkeley or El Cerrito, California, but if you Google DC Piano California, you'll find them. They're awesome. I love them. They're really super helpful. They've always got fair deals. See if they've got any way of referring you to someone in your area, or they might have advice on how you can find someone in your area. Heidi Banker says, my only claim to fame is as a tutor. That is cool. Aldo says, I'm going to kill Adele and Dilbert and going to praise your name. I cannot wait to see it. I look forward. I'm glad you're back too. Wait a minute, you left your band because of drug issues. I'm going to guess that this is because the band had issues. Well, man, good on you for taking care of yourself and getting out of that situation. And, I hope you make it, and I hope to see you on Jimmy Fallon singing your song. And if you choose to give me a shout, I thank you in advance. That is super, super kind, and I really appreciate it. Aldo's, my intention was electronic music. Right on. Heidi, for kids who are different, my challenge is the expectations of parents. Yeah. Yes, I can dig that. Capone, I like Jimi Hendrix music, but sometimes his voice sounds like a cow when he sings low register. Is it wrong way to sing? What's happening? He was what Jimi Hendrix did was a character voice. He wasn't a trained vocalist. And that's fine. Like that's totally fine to not be a trained vocalist. It becomes an issue when you can't do something either in your song or in a song that you're covering and you don't have the skills to do it. That's when all of this training and theory behind it can be very, very helpful. But yeah, I mean, Hendrix in a sort of stylized delivery like that, you're gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. The songs are great though. I love singing Hendrix tunes. And there's some beautiful covers of Hendrix tunes. And not to alienate myself from anyone, but like I sort of put Bob Dylan in this camp. Bob Dylan is perhaps one of the greatest songwriters ever. His songs are amazing. But I don't really ever want to listen to Bob Dylan sing those songs. I love it when other people sing his music. I think it's fantastic. But if you love Bob Dylan, that's cool. Like, you're entitled to love Bob Dylan. It's awesome. Oh, I lost it again here. Aldo, started again, found me in 2 months, what I would do in 6 months. Love and respect. Excellent. Thank you. Not all. Radu Alexandra Iona. Hey, I am a newbie here. You are a great teacher. Hope to see more videos soon. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, the chat is open. It's great. I'm glad that you could make it tonight. Or morning or whatever, wherever it is, wherever you are. I see I have to move it along here, don't I? Minran Yoke says, I wanted to ask how I can make my voice more manly. People say I have a feminine voice. Is it because of listening to too much Lady Gaga? Don't know. I don't know. I mean, if you want to sound, I mean, and my first question is, what is it to sound manly? Like, what is a manly sound? Is it like a Barry White, like super hey, kind of a thing, which I do not have that voice, and that's fine. But then I think of Jeff Buckley, who has this incredibly vulnerable, lilting delivery to his voice, but is clearly a man. I have a high voice. I'm frequently mistaken on the phone for a woman, and it's actually never bothered me. It just doesn't. If you want to sound more manly, focus on your thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice. Know that by weighting it, you will not be setting yourself up for a successful transition through the secondo passaggio. And if you weight it too much, you can really tire it out very quickly. And so you want to be very, very careful about that. If you're wanting to sound more manly because of other people, because they're saying you have a feminine voice, then I have some rather choice words for those people, because you are the only person on planet Earth with your voice, and I would hope that you would love your voice and never want to be anything but you, period, whatever that is. So you want to be like heavier with the thyroarytenoid muscle, chest voice. That tends to be like the manly zone, but I would just be myself, man. I would be me, whatever that is. Michael. About first question, higher notes and range of passaggio. I can still sing them, but it is much more possible my voice is going to crack then. You're probably imbalanced. If you are setting up properly to make a smooth transition, there's not quite enough airflow. Practice some engagement exercises as you ascend into the secondo passaggio and see if that helps. Cracking is an indicator of an imbalance. There's either not enough airflow, or there's too much vocal fold engagement, or not quite enough vocal fold engagement. We're out of alignment. We're out of balance there. Michael, I usually train hardly, about 1 hour a day, and maybe, I'm not sure about it, it is when I warm up my chest voice that I'm not sure what that means. Sorry. Jaheim, how can I increase my vocal range? It used to be from G2 to G5, but dropped to E2 to E5. I'd want to know why it dropped. What happened? Did something happen? Yeah, what happened? Yes, Jaheim, you do. It's bedtime here, and the girls are getting shepherded to bed. Radu Alexandra Iona. While a newbie on a live section, I have been practicing the videos and the voice has improved. Excellent. That is wonderful, and I am glad to hear it. May it continue to be so. Hello, Radu, says Jaheim. Jaheim responds back. Minran, what is vocal range? Vocal range is just the range of notes that, generically speaking, range is the range of notes that we can sing. So every one of us has like a sort of lower boundary that we can sing, and then we have an upper boundary. The upper boundary tends to be kind of flexible. So with practice and attention and sometimes good constructive criticism from a teacher, we can learn to make these shifts through registration events. Now, to be more specific about vocal range, we can also refer to vocal fach, F-A-C-H. I'm actually a little uncertain on the spelling now. I've seen it spelled F-A-C-H, and I've seen it spelled F-A-C-H-E. I'm not sure about it, but in any case, fach. And vocal fach takes into account the location of those register transitions, primo passaggio, secondo passaggio, and third passaggio. So the secondo passaggio is what most people refer to as the break. Most people don't notice the primo passaggio. The space in between them is the mixed voice, where the thyroarytenoid dominant muscle and the cricothyroid dominant muscle are really equally utilizing the vocal fold, and it can be somewhat tenuous as we navigate through it. And so when we take into account those registration events where the transitions are and our ultimate range, and then we take into consideration the characteristics of our voice in the lower part, in the middle part, in the higher parts, then we come upon vocal, fach. And fach, within any group, there are numerous subgroups. So like you've heard perhaps the word tenor before. Male vocalists, tenors, let's just say tenors. Within the tenor group, there are numerous subgroups: robusto, spinto, lyric, leggero, a couple others that I don't really remember off the top of my head. And it's similar for sopranos and altos and baritones as well. And you find your vocal range by locating the secondo passaggio, and then noting the characteristics of your voice throughout the range, in the upper register and how it responds, in your lower register and how it responds. Typically, we have to have a balanced vocal delivery before it becomes possible to discern those registration events. So if you're new to vocal training, stick to very, very comfortable notes for the time being. get those vowels in alignment so E, A, A, O, and U resonate similarly in a melismatic phrase, and then start to expand outwards and explore the zona de passaggio, the secondo passaggio, and that will determine, you'll figure out your fosh that way. Greg says, this is just in the upper parts of my chest voice. Like I was singing a song yesterday that was mostly between F3 and C sharp 4. Passaggio was E flat 4, but even the notes below middle C sounded dull. I really wonder about the vowel mods if you're too modified, or if you're pushing too hard on the thioarytenoid dominant voice. Those would be two culprits in that. I would really, really extol you to back off that engagement. You know, find the lowest volume delivery that you can do in the range that you have delineated there, and then see what happens. See if you still hear that dullness. If you don't, then you're probably pressing too hard on the thioarytenoid muscle, and it's dampening the tissues in the oral cavity, which is diminishing the resonance in the rest of it, and that's making it sound a bit dull. But if you've got that then and that would lead me to believe that it's more of a vowel mod thing. This video I'm talking about, if the link went through, it kind of came through. I think it looks okay. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, I'll save that for later. JC's Radiant Ray is talking to Michael. Voice 445. Jeff, sometimes I get terrible headaches when working in the top portion of my range. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Not consistently. I have certainly given myself a headache. But that was a long, long time ago, and I wasn't really doing... I was creating so much internal pressure. I was pushing way too hard. But it was never a consistent thing. It would just happen from time to time. Yeah, not consistently. Like I said, every once, like I said, once or twice I've done that when I wasn't really, really using airflow quite the right way. And certainly other times I've been like a little headachy and then sang and made it worse. Can you speak more to that? Tell me more about what's going on. We don't have a ton of time left, but I would be curious to see if there's more to that. JC's Radiant Ray is talking to Michael regarding sampling, and that is kind of true. There is nothing quite like an acoustic piano, but man, samplers never need to be tuned, and that's something you need to figure into your acoustic piano, is that it's going to need to be tuned probably, depending on your environment, every 6 months to a year. Absolutely every year. Absolutely, wherever you are. Here in England, I could probably have my piano tuned every 4 months. It just gets prohibitively expensive, quite frankly, so I stretch it out a little bit farther. That's why you may have noticed that a lot of the videos recently that I've been releasing, I've been doing them on my Nord because I need to get the piano tuned. Minra Nyok says, when is the next live AMA? Ask me anything. I do this every Saturday at 6 p.m. London time. So 6 p.m. London time. That's where, Saturday evenings, that's where it is. I happen to be in Spain, so it's actually almost 8 o'clock here. But I keep it 6 p.m. London times, Saturdays. That's when you can find these every week, unless something happens. Jaheim, I started working on being able to sing lower notes and lost. Absolutely, man. Like, wherever you focus your attention, you got to make time for both. If you want to have that extra bit of range, then you're going to have to circle back around and incorporate that practice into it. But when we focus on the lower register, we don't have to lose the higher register, but we've got to keep up the practice for it all. And then perhaps another thing that would be important too would be some exercises to really integrate the full expanse of your range. Usually, I like pentatonic scales for that. So like a 2-octave pentatonic scale is a really, really great way to work on, just integrating all the different aspects of your ranges. Michael, I wanted to say that day I trained chest voice and head voice the next day, straining and tongue plus straining. I mean, I wouldn't recommend, if you're practicing straining, it wouldn't be a surprise that you're going to lose some notes. I wouldn't, if that's what that means, I wouldn't suggest that. Live event, Jay, welcome. I haven't seen you pop up in a while. It's good to have you back. Radu Alexandra Iona, is it wrong to do warm-ups with mixed voice, combining chest voice and head voice instead of doing it all separately? It can cause any damage. No, of course not. No, the full range warm-ups on my channel go through the zona de passaggio. Now, if you're suggesting that this range where they're in parity is expanded, that's not something I typically work on. The zona de passaggio, what I would consider to be the mix range, is a very short period, usually a minor third, minor third, perfect fourth, which is really just, wait a second, no, sorry, excuse me, 2 whole steps. So like, yeah, call it, no, really more of like a major second, minor third in space is what I would consider mix. The reality is that most of us, almost, whether we think we're doing this or not, we're kind of always singing with somewhat of a mix. The cricothyroid muscles, even lower into our chest range, are still active and still working on the vocal fold. It's just in that transition that they really take over dominance. And even when they are dominant, the thyroarytenoid muscle or chest voice muscle is still working a little bit too. When we isolate them entirely, we get different affectations. So in the interest of unifying the ranges and registers of our voices, my practice is to limit the amount of cricothyroid dominance in what we would think of as the chest voice, and limit the amount of thyroarytenoid dominance in what we think of as the head voice. And that, when coupled with good resonance carry through, tends to give us a really, really beautiful full range sound. Jaheim is talking about doing warm-ups in mixed voice, and that seems reasonable. JC's Radiant Ray. To me, the real piano is acoustic one. I've got an old piano in my family house, tuned it, and even if it is not that good, there's a huge difference between digital and acoustic. Voice 445, I never feel strained. If anything, it is during periods of unusual focus and flexibility. Which I have to scroll back here. Gosh, I don't know. I don't know what could be causing your headaches. If it's really bad, then you need to see an ENT or an otolaryngologist. They might be able to help you with this. I'm thinking possible inner ear stuff, possible sinus cavity stuff. I just don't know, and I'm not qualified to make any kind of real assertions about what that might be. Mike Brannigan, Jeff, I'm a tenor. My passaggio occurs at F. where I have to sing a passage with a lot of Fs, is there a way to strengthen the F? My first thought is whether the where the Fs occur in the phrase is like if you've got a lot of stuff below the F or if you have stuff that's above the F. So if you're going to the F from below it, make sure that you're light on the thyroarytenoid voice. You've got to be light going up to that. I mean, it doesn't really get any more challenging than what you're describing. I would practice the phrases taking all the consonants out so that you're dealing only with the vowels initially. And again, being very discerning about the quality of your voice as you're ascending to the F. If it's coming off sounding weak, or you're having difficulty staying on the vocal fold, you got to back off the engagement of the thyroarytenoid muscle below it. That will allow for a stronger connection in the zona de passaggio and at the secondo passaggio in this case. And that should make it stay on the vocal fold more securely, give it a bit more resonance and color, and make it stronger. Kimani, you know what? Singing with emotion. I talked about this at length at the very beginning of our session today. And since we're almost out of time, I want to take the other questions that are here on screen. As soon as this is over, YouTube will publish it and you can watch it on my channel. And so what I would like to suggest is you circle back around and watch the first little bit of our live event, because I talked at great length about singing with emotion. That could be it. Voice 445. I wonder why that would be, though. It's a fascinating thing. I would love to hear what an ENT or otolaryngologist would say about that. Yeah, fascinating. Radu, Alexandra, Iona. It's easier, and yes, I'm able to reach high notes easier. Excellent. I can do that. Greg, Minron Yoke, I am new to opera. How do I start my practice as a beginner? Can you give me a list of songs or websites that can help me? Well, if you're a beginner, first things first, focus on getting your engagement and airflow sorted out. The Vakai method is a great place to start, and I mean, pretty much everyone sings the Vakai stuff. I don't even study opera, and I study the Vakai. So that would be a good place to begin. And two, those often come with accompaniment CDs. So that would be a really, really good place to start. Strain means how to sing without strain. That's okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying, how to sing without strain. I guess the thing is that in theory, you should be training to sing without strain all the time. That should be kind of like, part of the process of making sure that you're not straining the whole thing. And I have to say, Michael, I've kind of lost track of what the question was in general. I feel like you're giving me like a good delineation of what your practice is, and that's cool, but I'm not sure what the question in that is. Are any newbie tips? From Minron Yoke, take your time, be patient. This is a process. It doesn't end. It just doesn't. We're all, once you take on being a musician, it never finishes. You're never done. It never stops. As you get better, your acuity and ability to hear your voice will increase, and you will hear other things that you did not hear before. And that, I hope, though it's kind of like, it's almost like a curse. I hope that is true, because you will continue to hear a little bit more of what you can do, and that's what makes us artists, because we keep on staying a little bit further beyond what our current abilities are. Capone, middle register golden notes. Just a few notes before the head voice sounds best. I don't know if this is the right term. I think that people have different names for that, but you're absolutely right. Like that area right below the usually it's right in that area, like right about the primo passaggio, once you have it under control, and just a little bit into the zona di passaggio is like the most flexible, lovely, resonant area, and it is usually pretty easy to sing in, and it's just wonderful, and it just feels good. Aaron Rose, is there a way to keep my voice in mixed? Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're almost always using our voices in a somewhat mixed capacity. The cricothyroid muscles, even when you're in your thyroarytenoid dominant voice, that's why we say thyroarytenoid dominant, because it's not only the thyroarytenoid muscle. The cricothyroids are working to a certain degree. You can usually expand the zona di passaggio to have that sort of mixed affectation, countertenor affectation lower down. If you wish, you just make sure that you are using adequate airflow so you're not overly straining your voice. Jaheim agrees, yes, and that is true. Minran Yok, any web resources for a person who is new to this? Well, there's all kinds of stuff out there. Honestly, I'm about to release an ebook that's going to have a glossary that's going to cover all the terminology that I regularly use. So it's that would be one place that will become available rather soon. For operatic singing, I would recommend, if you really, really want the full enchilada training soprano voice, or I don't actually know your vocal range or what you may be studying, but Richard Miller's books, appropriate for your range, I would highly, highly recommend them. If you Google Richard Miller, you'll probably find a lot of resources too, that's online and free. You're very welcome, Heidi. I've missed having you here too, and I'm glad to see you back. You're very welcome, Greg. JC's Radiant Ray says goodbye, and you are very welcome. It is a pleasure. I'm very, very grateful to all of you for showing up, and I am going to sign off now. I'm sorry for those of you that are just getting in here, but I've already gone over a little bit. And Danielle, that's a very, very good question, but we're going to have to tackle that next time, Danielle. So I want to put that on my list for next week's chat, and I will get them there. Thank you for understanding, Michael. I'm sorry that got a little bit blocked around. Thanks, Maddie. I appreciate that. Capone, yes, we're having a holiday in Spain. We're trying to seek sunshine, although it rained all day today. Danielle, the passaggio notes are hard for all of us. That is, I've spent probably 99% of my time as an instructor helping people to smooth out and make that range work. Thank you all so very, very much. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you for joining me tonight. I bid you all a fond, fond farewell, a good evening, and as always, take really good care of your voices, enjoy singing, and I'll see you next week. Bye.